A racist employee at a luxury store accuses a black girl of theft and humiliates her. She is shocked when she is called into the company headquarters and sees the little girl with her father. Ava stepped into the jewelry store, her heart fluttering with excitement. The soft chime of the doorbell echoed as she took in the opulent space, lit warmly to make everything sparkle and glow. Her father was still in the car outside, finishing a business call, and had told her to go ahead and look around. He'd be in soon, he'd promised, and she couldn't wait to show him all the beautiful pieces she'd discover. She walked slowly down the aisles, hands behind her back like she'd seen adults do, soaking in the glittering displays of diamonds, rubies, and emeralds. Every piece looked like it had come straight from a fairy tale, and Ava felt like she was stepping into her own magical kingdom. Then, something caught her eye, a diamond ring sitting out on a small velvet-lined tray on the counter, not behind the glass like everything else. The ring was breathtaking, with a large, dazzling stone that seemed to sparkle even brighter under the store lights. Her eyes lit up as she inched closer, glancing around to make sure she was alone. Slowly, almost reverently, she reached out and lifted the ring, slipping it onto her small finger. She held her hand up to the light, watching as the diamond threw off 1,000 tiny rainbows. For a moment she felt elegant, imagining herself as a princess in a world of shimmering jewels and grand ballrooms. "What do you think you're doing?" Ava jumped, her heart pounding, and turned to see a tall, older woman standing behind the counter, her face twisted in a scowl. The woman's gaze dropped to the ring on Ava's finger, and her expression soured. Ava quickly tried to take the ring off, her fingers fumbling. I was just looking," she stammered, her voice small and uncertain. She hadn't meant any harm. She was just admiring the beautiful ring. "Looking?" the woman repeated, her tone cold and sharp. She took a step closer, reaching out and grabbing Ava's hand roughly, making Ava flinch. "That ring wasn't just lying around for you to play with. You must have taken it from the display." Ava's eyes widened in shock, her cheeks flushing. "No, I didn't. It was right here," she said, pointing at the tray where the ring had been resting. "Oh, don't lie to me." The woman's fingers tightened around Ava's wrist, making her feel even smaller. "You think you can just come in here and take whatever you like, don't you?" Ava's stomach knotted with a mix of shame and confusion. She tried to explain, her voice trembling. I just wanted to see." The woman scoffed, cutting her off. "Just wanted to see. Is that what you call it?" She released Ava's wrist with a small shove and slapped the ring off her finger, letting it clatter onto the tray. "This isn't a place for little girls to play, and these aren't toys. What kind of parents let a child like you wander around unsupervised?" Ava felt her face grow hot, a lump forming in her throat as she tried to hold back tears. "My dad, he's just outside. He told me I could look." "Outside?" the woman repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "Oh, I'm sure he did. And I'm sure he'd say anything to cover for you if he had to." The words stung, and Ava's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. "I wasn't trying to steal." "Enough!" The woman's voice was cold and dismissive. "I don't care what your excuses are. People like you have no place in a store like this." The harshness of her words hit Ava like a slap, and a tear slipped down her cheek. She hadn't expected this, hadn't thought her innocent fascination would turn into something so awful. She managed a faint, trembling whisper. I was just looking." The woman rolled her eyes, her mouth twisting with contempt. "Oh, please," she sneered. "I know exactly what kind of people do this. You think you can get away with anything by playing innocent, don't you?" Ava's small shoulders slumped, and more tears slipped down her cheeks as she felt the weight of the woman's scorn pressing down on her. She wished her dad would come in, that he'd see her and take her away from this horrible, cold place where she suddenly felt like she didn't belong at all. But the woman kept going, her voice sharp and relentless, as if she wouldn't stop until she'd drained every last bit of Ava's happiness away. Ava stood frozen, her small face wet with tears as the saleswoman continued her harsh scolding. The ring lay on the counter where the woman had slapped it from her hand, a tiny sparkle catching the light, mocking Ava's earlier excitement. The store's door chimed and Ava's father, Marcus, walked in, his face shifting immediately as he saw her tear-streaked face and quivering shoulders. His expression darkened as he approached them, his steps firm and steady. "Ava?" he asked, kneeling down and placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What happened, sweetheart?" Ava took a shuddering breath, clutching her father's hand. "Daddy, I was just looking at the ring. It was on the counter, and she said I was trying to steal it." The saleswoman's gaze flicked over to him, her expression tightening with irritation as she crossed her arms. "Your daughter," she said, barely disguising her disdain, "was handling an expensive ring from the display, and I stopped her. It wasn't on the counter, as she claims. She took it from behind the glass." Ava shook her head vigorously, looking up at her father with wide, tear-filled eyes. "No, Daddy. It was right here on the counter, just sitting there. I didn't take anything. I just wanted to look at it." The woman scoffed, her face twisted in a look of smug disbelief. "Of course she'd say that. I've seen this before. People come in here all the time with their just-looking excuses, thinking they can slip things into their pockets when no one's watching." Marcus's face hardened, his eyes glinting as he looked down at Ava, brushing away a tear from her cheek. "So, you're accusing my daughter, a child, of trying to steal an item from your store?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The woman huffed, crossing her arms more tightly. "Yes, sir. I know what I saw. She got caught and started crying to cover it up. It's a typical trick." "Typical trick," he repeated, his voice edged with cold anger. "Is that really how you think children behave? Or does it just apply to certain children?" His gaze was sharp, daring her to challenge him. The woman's cheeks flushed, but she didn't back down. "Look, I don't care what you want to believe, sir, but I know my job. I'm here to protect this store's reputation and merchandise, and I won't stand by and let people like her—" "People like her?" Marcus interrupted, his tone now dangerously quiet. His hand tightened slightly on Ava's shoulder, a protective gesture. "Yes," she replied, her voice laced with implications that she made no effort to hide. "This store is for people who understand its value, for those who know the rules, not for children who think they can walk in, touch anything they like, and make up stories when they're caught." He took a slow breath, his gaze fixed firmly on her. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "You're accusing my daughter of stealing without any proof? And you think she should be removed from the store?" The woman's mouth pressed into a thin line as she stared back at him. "It's not just what I think. It's store policy. If you don't take her out immediately, I will call security to escort you both out." Marcus held her close, his expression growing colder. "Security?" he repeated, his tone filled with disbelief. "You're threatening to call security on a little girl for touching a ring that you left out." The woman raised her chin defiantly, clearly unmoved. "If that's what it takes to maintain the standards of this store, then yes, it's my job to make sure people who don't understand those standards are shown the door." "Standards?" he echoed, his voice filled with incredulity. "I'd say the only one who doesn't meet those standards here is you." He looked around the store, then back at her, an icy calm in his eyes. "In fact, I know exactly what this store's standards are because I'm the owner." The woman's eyes widened for a brief second before she let out a scoff, clearly dismissing him. "Right," she said sarcastically, "and I suppose I'm the Queen of England. Look, I've dealt with people pulling stunts before. Just because you're unhappy with how I handle things doesn't mean you can waltz in here and pretend to be someone you're not." He raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanging. "Pretending?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "I don't have to pretend anything. This store, along with every other location in this city, is owned by my company." The woman folded her arms and gave him a mocking smile. "Oh, please, I don't know who you're trying to impress, but I assure you, I don't fall for these kinds of stories. If you're really the owner, then prove it. Otherwise, I suggest you and your daughter leave before I call someone to deal with this nonsense." Marcus took out his phone, his calm demeanor never wavering as he typed in a quick message. "Oh, don't worry," he said quietly. "You'll get all the proof you need soon enough." The woman's smug smile faltered, but she quickly tried to regain her composure. "Fine," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "You have 5 minutes before I call security, and I guarantee they won't be as patient with you as I have been." He smirked, crossing his arms as he looked around the store, his patience starting to wear thin. "You're right about one thing," he replied. "I don't think patience is something this place can afford much longer. Starting with you." The woman's face went red as she sputtered, struggling to respond. But before she could gather her words, his phone pinged with a response. He glanced at it, then looked back at her with an unreadable expression. "Believe me," he said, tucking the phone away. "If anyone here is overstaying their welcome, it's not me. And if you're so convinced about calling security, maybe you should call corporate too. I'm sure they'd love to hear how you've handled this situation." Her defiance crumbled slightly, her confidence shaken by his tone and unwavering stance. "Corporate," she echoed, her voice hesitant, as if she wasn't entirely sure anymore. Yes, he said, voice calm and unrelenting. I suggest you check your contact list if you really want to find out just who I am. The woman's expression flickered with confusion and unease, but she quickly masked it with another haughty sneer. This is ridiculous, she muttered, her voice lacking its previous conviction. People always have some story. Marcus stared at her, his gaze unflinching. Stories, he repeated softly. The only story here is how a young girl was treated like a criminal for daring to look at a ring in a store owned by her own family. He paused, letting his words sink in. But don't worry. By the time we're done here, you'll know exactly who we are. The woman's face paled as his words hit home, but she still tried to maintain her front, her voice growing weaker. If you really think this charade is going to intimidate me, you're mistaken. He simply looked at her, an icy smile touching his lips. I don't need to intimidate anyone. The truth has a way of coming out on its own. He placed a protective hand on Ava's shoulder, his stance unwavering as he waited, calmly and silently, for her to make her next move. The woman stood stiffly behind the counter, her arms crossed, a self-satisfied smirk tugging at her lips. She glanced between Marcus and Ava, her expression cold, yet laced with a smugness that only deepened as she checked her watch. Just then, the store's door chimed, and a security guard walked in, his gaze moving between the saleswoman, Marcus, and Ava with a look of professional curiosity. He quickly assessed the situation, his attention settling on the saleswoman, who beckoned him over with an impatient wave. Thank goodness, she said with a huff, pointing at Marcus. I need you to escort this man and his daughter out. He's been causing a disturbance, and his daughter was handling one of our rings from the display. They refused to leave when I asked them to. Marcus glanced at the security guard, his face calm, his hand resting protectively on Ava's shoulder. Ava clutched his hand, her face still tear-streaked, but now showing a hint of confusion and frustration. She looked up at her father, her young eyes searching for reassurance. The security guard approached Marcus, his tone respectful but firm. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. This is a private establishment, and if the staff feel there's a disturbance, we have a responsibility to address it. Marcus met the guard's gaze with a steady look. I understand you're just doing your job, he said quietly, his voice laced with controlled frustration. But I'd hope you can see there's more to this than what's being claimed. The guard hesitated, glancing between Marcus and the saleswoman, but he nodded, keeping his tone neutral. I get that, sir, but I'm bound to follow the protocol. If the staff believe there's an issue, we need to address it by asking the involved parties to leave. The saleswoman's smirk widened, her arms still folded across her chest as she watched Marcus with an air of triumph. You heard him, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. We have rules in this store, and those who don't follow them don't get to stay. Maybe this will be a lesson for the both of you about respecting boundaries. Marcus took a slow breath, his gaze cool but controlled as he looked at the saleswoman. Boundaries, he echoed, his voice calm but edged with steel. If anyone here has crossed boundaries, it's you. But I understand. You need the last word today. The woman lifted her chin, the smug look deepening. That's right. And in a store of this caliber, that's the way things are done. Marcus glanced at the security guard, nodding as he tightened his grip on Ava's hand. Fine. We'll leave, he said, his voice steady. But rest assured this isn't over. And the next time you see us, I'll be the one making the rules clear. The woman's face didn't falter, but her eyes sparkled with satisfaction. I look forward to it, she replied, giving him a mocking smile. Maybe you'll even learn a thing or two about how to behave in places like this. Ava looked up at her father, her young face a mixture of confusion and hurt. Daddy, why do we have to leave? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus knelt down, brushing a tear from her cheek and giving her a gentle, reassuring smile. Because some people think they have the right to judge others, sweetheart. But remember this, no one, and I mean no one, has the right to make you feel small. Ava nodded, still clutching his hand tightly as he stood up, facing the woman one last time with a look that was both calm and unwavering. Without another word, he led Ava toward the door, his steps steady, his head held high. As they exited the store, Ava glanced back, catching a glimpse of the saleswoman's smug face as she watched them go, her arms still crossed in satisfaction. Outside the store, Marcus led Ava to a nearby bench and knelt down to meet her eyes, his expression softening as he wiped away the last of her tears. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and hurt. Daddy, Did I do something wrong? She asked, her voice small. He shook his head firmly. No, sweetheart. You didn't do anything wrong, he said, his voice gentle but resolute. That woman? She was being unfair and frankly cruel. She judged you just because she wanted to, because she thought you didn't belong. Ava frowned, her brows knitting together. But why? Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes people act like that because they carry unfair, ugly ideas about others. They believe certain people don't belong in places like that store. It's called prejudice, Ava. And in this case, it was racism. Ava blinked, trying to make sense of it. So, she was mean to me because of how I look? Marcus nodded, a sadness flickering in his eyes. But he kept his voice calm. Yes, that's exactly it. She assumed you didn't belong because of your appearance. And that's not fair, not right, and certainly not something you deserve. He paused, letting his words sink in. People like her are out there, Ava. It's not something we can change in a day, but that doesn't mean they get to treat you, or anyone else, like that. Ava's face tightened, a small spark of determination in her young eyes. So, are you going to let her get away with it? A smile played on Marcus's lips, pride shining through his seriousness. Absolutely not. People like her need to understand that their actions have consequences. Tomorrow, I'm going to set up a meeting with her and with everyone else who runs that store, and she'll find out exactly who we are and what we stand for. Ava's eyes lit up with curiosity. A meeting? Marcus nodded, leaning in closer. Yes. I want her to see that her judgment of you was wrong, and that treating people differently because of how they look isn't just unkind. It's something I won't tolerate in my company. He paused, a twinkle of excitement sparking in his eyes. And you know what? You can be there with me if you want. You can attend the meeting, and together we'll remind her that everyone deserves respect. Ava's eyes widened in surprise, then brightened with a quiet determination. I want to go. I want her to see that she was wrong. Marcus smiled, pride swelling in his chest. That's my girl. Tomorrow she'll see that no one can judge you without facing the consequences. And you'll get to see how we stand up for ourselves in a world that still has a lot to learn. With that, Marcus wrapped an arm around Ava, holding her close. They sat in quiet for a moment, both finding strength in the warmth of the other, knowing that tomorrow they'd face the challenge together. Marcus and Ava sat quietly in the grand conference room, the faint hum of city sounds muffled behind the thick glass windows. Ava's hand rested in her father's, her fingers gripping tightly as they both waited. Marcus was calm but unyielding, his expression hard as he prepared to confront the saleswoman who had humiliated his daughter. He gave Ava a reassuring nod, silently promising her that this time things would be different. The door creaked open, and the saleswoman entered, looking around with a casual confidence that faded the moment she saw who was waiting for her. Her steps faltered, and her eyes widened as she registered Marcus and Ava sitting across the table. She hesitated, a forced smile appearing on her face as she quickly tried to mask her surprise. "Please have a seat," Marcus said, his voice steady and commanding as he gestured to the chair across from them. His gaze never wavered, and his calm demeanor only seemed to make her more uncomfortable. Ava watched her closely, a new sense of quiet strength in her eyes. The woman cleared her throat and sat down, clasping her hands nervously in her lap. "Mr. Green," she began, her voice already tinged with defensiveness. "I didn't realize you would be here personally." Marcus tilted his head slightly, his gaze cool. "I'm sure you didn't," he replied. "Just like you didn't realize who I was yesterday when you treated my daughter like a criminal. Or did that not matter to you?" The woman shifted, clearly uncomfortable. She opened her mouth to speak, but seemed unsure of where to start. I was just doing my job, sir. When I saw your daughter with the ring, I thought—" "No," Marcus cut her off, his voice sharp. "You didn't think. That's the problem. You made a judgment, a harsh and baseless assumption, and then you treated my daughter, my 10-year-old daughter, as though she didn't belong. A child who came to admire jewelry in her father's store was treated like a thief by you." The woman's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to respond. "Sir, we have standards, and that ring wasn't where it was supposed to be, so I assumed—" "Let me stop you right there," Marcus interjected, his voice rising slightly. "What you assumed was that she was guilty, and you assumed it because you didn't like what you saw. Because you saw a young black girl holding a piece of jewelry in an upscale store, and that didn't fit your standards, did it?" The woman's face turned red, but she raised her chin, trying to maintain her dignity. "Mr. Green, I have to protect the merchandise. When I saw her holding the ring, I did what I thought was best for the store. I was doing my duty." "Your duty?" Marcus repeated, leaning forward, his gaze piercing. "Your duty is to provide service to every customer, not to judge them based on your narrow, prejudiced assumptions. Your duty was to treat her with the same respect you would show to any other child or adult who walks into that store." The woman bristled slightly, a trace of defiance flickering in her eyes. "With all due respect, Mr. Green, we can't afford to take risks with customers, and if I hadn't acted quickly, that ring could have been damaged or worse." Ava watched as her father's expression shifted, his jaw tightening. "So your answer is that this is about protecting the merchandise?" he asked, his voice laced with contempt. "That's your excuse for berating a little girl? For slapping the ring out of her hand? For humiliating her?" The woman hesitated, her voice faltering. I thought she might take it. I've seen situations like this before, and I was only trying to prevent." "Prevent what?" Marcus snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Prevent a child from admiring a ring that you carelessly left on the counter? Is that what you were trying to prevent? Because from where I'm standing, it seems more like you were only trying to prevent my daughter from being treated with respect." The woman's face reddened, and her hands gripped the edge of the table tightly. "Mr. Green, please. I wasn't trying to be discriminatory. I was just doing my job. I didn't mean to be racist." Marcus's eyes narrowed, his gaze turning even colder. "Oh, so now you want to claim ignorance?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Let's be very clear. You looked at my daughter and, without a second thought, treated her like she didn't belong. You dismissed her, belittled her, and accused her of something she didn't do. And you did all of that because you couldn't see past your own prejudice." The woman opened her mouth to protest, her voice shaky. I don't have any prejudice, Mr. Green. I would have done the same thing to any other child." "No, I don't believe you would," Marcus replied, his voice low but fierce. "Because I saw the way you looked at her. I heard the tone in your voice, the words you chose. You didn't care about the truth, you cared about putting her in her place. And don't think I didn't hear your comments yesterday about people like her." The woman's face drained of color, and she looked down at her lap, avoiding his gaze. I wasn't trying to," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "Save it," Marcus said, his tone cutting. "Your words speak for themselves. You saw a young black girl, and you immediately assumed she was up to no good. You humiliated her, embarrassed her, and made her feel small. And I want you to explain to me why you think that's acceptable behavior." The woman swallowed, struggling to form a response. "Mr. Green, please. I didn't mean any harm. I was just following procedure." The ring was left out, and I thought it was best to intervene. Marcus took a slow, deep breath, trying to rein in his anger. "Following procedure?" he repeated, his voice deadly calm. "Procedure would mean treating every customer fairly and with respect. Procedure would mean asking questions, understanding the situation. Procedure would never mean slapping a ring out of a child's hand and accusing her of theft." Ava, who had been sitting quietly, looked up at her father, her gaze fierce. "Daddy's right," she said, her young voice steady. "You didn't even listen to me. You didn't even ask what happened. You just yelled at me." The woman looked at Ava, her face twisting with guilt. I'm sorry, Ava. I didn't think." "No," Marcus interrupted sharply, his eyes flashing with anger. "That's exactly the point. You didn't think. You didn't think because you didn't care. You didn't see her as a person. You saw her as a problem to be dealt with." The woman's lip trembled, her earlier defiance now crumbling as she struggled to find words. "Mr. Green, please, I didn't mean for things to go so far." Marcus held up his phone, the screen showing security footage from the day before. He pressed play, and they all watched as the events unfolded on the small screen. The woman's harsh scolding, the way she slapped the ring out of Ava's hand, her condescending expression as Ava tried to explain. "Explain this to me," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper, but thick with anger. "You were following procedure, you say? You were doing your duty? This isn't security, this is cruelty." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she watched the footage, her hands trembling. I don't know what to say, Mr. Green," she whispered, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't undo the harm you caused," Marcus replied coldly. "You made a little girl feel worthless, all because you couldn't see past your own biases, and then you lied to cover it up, pretending you were following some imaginary procedure." The woman's voice cracked as she tried to plead. "Please, Mr. Green, I need this job. I've worked here for years. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Marcus's face was unyielding, his expression resolute. No, you hurt her because you thought you could get away with it. You thought no one would care enough to hold you accountable. But let me make one thing clear. In my company, there is no place for people who judge others based on race, who humiliate children for their own biases. I will not tolerate it. The woman's shoulders slumped as the weight of his words sank in. Please don't fire me. I've given so much to this store. Marcus's voice was cold, leaving no room for negotiation. You're dismissed, effective immediately. Collect your belongings, and don't expect a reference. This is the last day you will ever step foot in one of my stores. She looked at him, her eyes wide with shock, then shifted to Ava, her gaze filled with regret. But Ava only stared back with calm defiance, her strength mirroring her father's. Marcus stood, extending a hand to Ava. Come on, sweetheart. We're done here, he said, his tone softening as he looked at his daughter. Ava took his hand, her head held high as she followed him out of the room, leaving the woman alone, her shame filling the empty space they left behind. The following morning, Marcus sat in his office, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows as he sipped his coffee and reviewed the plan he'd crafted the night before. Today was about sending a clear message. Prejudice and discrimination had no place in his stores, or any place he could influence. He was not only going to ensure the saleswoman was removed from his company, but he would also make it impossible for her to bring her narrow-minded behavior to any other high-end establishment. He leaned back in his chair and picked up the phone, dialing the number for his human resources director, Claire, a sharp and principled woman who had been his ally in upholding the company's values. Within minutes, Claire had answered, her voice brisk but warm. "Good morning, Marcus," she greeted. "I got your message last night about the incident at the store. I take it you want a full report on her dismissal?" "Yes, Claire, but I want more than that," Marcus said, his voice resolute. "The incident yesterday wasn't just about poor judgment. It was a clear case of discrimination, and I won't have someone like that representing my company, or anyone else's if I can help it." Claire paused, taking in the weight of his words. "I understand, Marcus. We'll make sure she's formally dismissed and won't be eligible for rehire within our company. But are you suggesting we go further?" "Exactly," he replied, his tone cold. "I want her blacklisted from the industry. She's a liability to any company that values customer experience and respect. I'll handle the external contacts, but I'll need HR to make sure her termination is clearly recorded as misconduct due to discriminatory behavior. That should be noted in her record, and it should be sent through the appropriate channels." "Of course," Claire agreed. "This will impact her future opportunities within similar establishments, especially those with connections to our industry network. I'll ensure the paperwork is thorough, and I assume you want this done quietly." Marcus thought for a moment. "Quietly, yes, but firmly. I don't want her crying wrongful termination and causing legal headaches, but I want her to understand that her behavior will follow her everywhere." He hung up, a determined look crossing his face. The next call he made was to a few key executives he trusted in the high-end retail industry, friends and colleagues who shared his values and had witnessed their own issues with prejudice and discrimination in their companies. They were seasoned professionals who valued a good reputation and knew that the right connections were essential to keeping their brand names untarnished. He started with James, an old friend who ran an exclusive line of boutique stores across the city. The phone rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "Marcus, my friend. What's this early morning call about?" "You usually wait until lunch," James chuckled. "James, this isn't a casual chat," Marcus replied, his tone serious. "I'm reaching out because I have an important matter I think you'll want to know about." The laughter faded from James's voice. "Go on, I'm listening." Marcus explained the events of the previous day, describing the saleswoman's treatment of Ava, the accusations, and her cold dismissal of their presence. He kept his voice steady, but his words carried the depth of his anger and disappointment. "Now, James," he continued, "I'm making sure this woman is dismissed from my company. But I want you and others in our industry to know exactly what she did. If someone with this level of prejudice can't see past a customer's appearance, she's a risk to any high-end store. This behavior shouldn't be tolerated anywhere, and I won't have her slipping into another business and mistreating anyone else." James was silent for a moment, processing. "Marcus, I'm appalled. To treat anyone that way, let alone a child, it's unacceptable. I'll inform my team that if she applies, Her file should be reviewed with care and rejected. Thank you, James. I appreciate it, Marcus said, relief and gratitude in his voice. We have to set a standard for the industry. After his call with James, Marcus spent the next few hours reaching out to other industry leaders, from luxury hotels to upscale department stores. Each call was met with a similar reaction: shock, anger, and an agreement that discrimination could not be tolerated, especially in businesses that prided themselves on inclusivity and impeccable service. By the end of the day, Marcus had set into motion a powerful network of influence. He knew that the saleswoman wouldn't be able to step into another high-end store without her actions following her. A warning would be there, lingering on her record. A quiet but powerful reminder that her actions had real consequences. Finally, Marcus took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair as a sense of satisfaction settled over him. He'd done what he set out to do. She would not be able to continue her career as if nothing had happened. If she wanted to work in this industry, she'd have to reckon with her actions, knowing that the path ahead would be anything but smooth. That evening, as Marcus walked into the house, Ava ran up to him, her face lighting up. "Daddy, did you make sure she wouldn't do that to anyone else?" He smiled, kneeling down to her level and pulling her into a gentle hug. "I did, sweetheart. People like her don't get to hide behind their mistakes. I made sure everyone knows what happened." Ava smiled, a mix of relief and pride shining in her eyes. "Good," she said softly, "because nobody should make someone feel like that." Marcus nodded, pride swelling in his chest. "Exactly, Ava. And because of you, she won't." Months had passed since the incident in the jewelry store, and Marcus had all but forgotten about the woman who had humiliated his daughter. The business world moved fast, and his days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and planning for the future. But one morning, as he reviewed some reports in his office, a knock on the door interrupted his focus. "Mr. Green," his assistant said, peeking in, her tone cautious. "There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Marcus looked up, slightly surprised. "Who is it?" "It's the former saleswoman from the store," she replied, her voice laced with discomfort. "She says she needs to speak with you personally." Marcus's expression hardened. He knew immediately why she was here. After he'd ensured her dismissal and blacklisting from the industry, her prospects would have been scarce. Nonetheless, he nodded and waved his hand. "Send her in." Moments later, the woman entered, looking nothing like the smug, confident employee he remembered. Her posture was hunched, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands clutching her purse tightly as though it were a lifeline. She stood before his desk, struggling to meet his gaze, her face full of nervous tension. "Mr. Green," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Why are you here?" The woman took a shaky breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I came here to ask for help." She swallowed, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Ever since that day, I haven't been able to find work. No one in the industry will hire me. Every jewelry store, every boutique I've applied to, they all turn me away. And you think that's my problem?" Marcus's voice was cold, his eyes steely as he watched her. She flinched slightly but took a step forward, her hands wringing nervously. "Mr. Green, I know I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake, but I've been trying to change. I've been attending seminars, taking courses on diversity, learning about empathy." Her voice broke slightly, and she took a breath. "Please, I'm begging you. I've lost everything. I can't support my family. I'm months behind on rent. All I need is a chance to prove I've changed." Marcus's gaze remained unyielding. "So, you expect me to forgive everything because you're struggling now? Do you think a few seminars are enough to erase the harm you caused?" The woman's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know I hurt your daughter. I can never undo that. But I've been trying to be better, to learn from my mistakes. Please, Mr. Green. I'm desperate." "Desperate?" Marcus repeated, his tone edged with anger. "Desperate like my daughter was, standing alone in that store while you humiliated her?" The woman's shoulders slumped, and she clasped her hands together in front of her, looking down. "Mr. Green, I am so sorry. I was ignorant. I was wrong. But please don't let this mistake define me forever. I've been doing everything I can to change." Marcus's gaze sharpened. "You call it a mistake, as though it were an accident. But what you did that day wasn't a mistake. It was a choice to judge my daughter, to treat her like she didn't belong. You thought you could humiliate her and get away with it because no one would care. And now, when that choice has caught up with you, you come here asking for help. The woman's voice shook as she pleaded. I know that I was wrong. And I know that I have no right to ask this of you. But please, Mr. Green, I have nothing left. I've lost everything. If you could just recommend me somewhere, give me a chance. Marcus leaned forward, his gaze cold and unyielding. And what about my daughter? What about the lesson she learned from you? The lesson that there are people in this world who will look at her and see only what they want to see? You taught her that day that people like you exist, people who will judge her without a second thought. The woman's hands shook, and she took a step back, her face stricken. Please, Mr. Green, I'm willing to do anything to make up for what I did. I've changed, I swear. I'm not the same person I was. Marcus shook his head slowly, a look of disappointment flashing across his face. You say you've changed, but the truth is, you only learned empathy after you lost everything. You only cared to change when you found yourself on the other side. And that isn't growth, it's desperation. The woman's voice cracked, and she wiped a tear from her cheek, her face filled with despair. Mr. Green, please. I don't know where else to go. Marcus stood, his gaze hard as he looked down at her. You created this reality for yourself. This is your consequence, and it's not something I can, or will, fix for you. The woman's shoulders slumped as she realized he would not help her. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came. Instead, she nodded slowly, accepting the finality in his words. Without another word, she turned and left his office, the weight of her actions pressing down on her as she walked out, defeated and alone. The following evening, Marcus sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the yard. Ava joined him, curling up beside him, her head resting on his shoulder as they sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the last few months lingering in their thoughts. After a while, Ava broke the silence, her young voice soft but thoughtful. Daddy, that lady from the store, did she ever say sorry? Marcus took a deep breath, thinking carefully before he answered. She did, yes. She came to my office today asking for help because she couldn't find a job. Ava's face twisted in confusion. She wanted you to help her? Marcus nodded. Yes. She said she had nowhere else to turn and was trying to show that she'd changed. She said she'd been learning, trying to be a better person. Ava looked up at him, her face a mixture of curiosity and concern. And did you help her? Marcus shook his head, his gaze thoughtful. No, I didn't. Because I realized that she wasn't asking for forgiveness, because she understood what she'd done. She was asking for help, because she wanted to get back what she'd lost. Ava processed his words, a small frown forming as she considered them. So, she only wanted to be nice because it was hurting her? Exactly, Marcus replied, a hint of sadness in his voice. She realized that the world isn't as forgiving as she'd hoped, and sometimes people only change when they have no other choice, but that doesn't mean they've truly learned anything. Ava thought about this for a moment, her young face filled with a wisdom that took Marcus by surprise. But Daddy, do you think people can really change if they only do it because they have to? Marcus looked at her, proud of how perceptive she was becoming. That's a good question, Ava. I think real change has to come from the heart, from understanding the harm you caused and wanting to make things better, even if it doesn't get you anything in return. He paused, letting his words settle. Sometimes people don't realize that the way they think and act can hurt others, and it takes something big to make them see it. Ava leaned into him, her voice soft. I remember how she made me feel that day, like I didn't belong. She took a deep breath. But I also remember you standing up for me. You made me feel like I do belong. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. And you do, Ava. No one has the right to make you feel less than anyone else. People like her are out there, but so are people who'll see you for who you are, who'll respect you and treat you with kindness. Ava nodded, absorbing his words, a sense of strength growing in her expression. I didn't understand it all before, but now I think I get it. It's not just about saying you're sorry, it's about meaning it. Marcus smiled, filled with pride. Exactly, Ava. And when we're hurt by people who don't understand that, we have to remember that their actions reflect on them, not on us. You have nothing to prove to people who can't see you clearly. Ava's small hand slipped into his, and she looked up at him with a new confidence in her eyes. Thank you, Daddy, for teaching me to stand up for myself, and for showing me that being strong doesn't mean being mean back. Marcus's heart swelled with pride, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You're going to grow up to be strong and kind, Ava, and no one will make you feel small again." As they sat together in the fading light, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that Ava understood the lesson he had fought so hard to teach her. He hadn't just stood up to a woman's prejudice that day. He'd shown Ava that she was worthy of respect